Order number 10, motion, adoption of the report of the Standing Committee on Labor and Social Welfare on the status of labor migration and the proposed policy interventions.
Chair Labor, Senator Sakaja was here a few minutes ago. Senator Sakaja, is he around? Yes, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I wish to move that the House adopts the motion on the report of the Standing Committee on Labor and Social Welfare on the status of labor migration and proposed policy interventions laid on the table of the Senate on Tuesday, the 2nd of November, 2021. Madam Speaker, this is a very, very important motion that comes by way of a report by the Standing Committee on Labor and Social Welfare that focuses mainly on our issues of labor migration from Kenya to the Middle East. Madam Speaker, I'm glad that Senator Susan Kihika, who is a very active member of the Labour Committee and who feels very strongly about these issues, because we did indeed tour these areas as a committee, including Saudi Arabia, Dubai, and I've engaged with other of our missions and Kenyans working in the GCC countries on this matter. Mr. Speaker, I doubt there's a senator here. I doubt there's a senator in this House who have ever, or who have not received distress calls from Kenyans, especially our ladies, our girls, domestic workers, who have either been stranded or who have loved ones who are sick, or who have lost lives in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and many other countries. And Mr. Speaker, as I move this, I acknowledge the fact that the countries that we're mentioning and we're speaking about are indeed countries with a proper diplomatic presence in Kenya, and we have presence in their countries, and we've had diplomatic relations for many years. But we're also cognizant of the fact that, Mr. Speaker, our main priority as leaders, as legislators, must always remain the people of Kenya. Mr. Speaker, in moving the debate on this report, because, Mr. Speaker, it would have been very simple and easy for us as a committee to just table a report and let it be that the members can see it. But we want this report adopted because there are very specific resolutions that only this House can take in plenary. Resolutions that will ensure the safety of our Kenyan workers in these countries, that will ensure that we streamline labor migration, that will ensure that, Mr. Speaker, we can take care of our people. And I'm very happy to see Senator Shionga as well, because she was very key in these discussions. Her county has very many people who have gone to these countries. So I recognize that the global labor migration is not a new phenomenon, and it remains a key contributor to the increasing global labor market. Needless to say, Mr. Speaker, Kenya migrant workers, and there are two categories. There are skilled migrant workers and unskilled, but they transcend borders in search of better opportunities. They do not go there because they don't love their country. They do not go there because they don't want the jobs that are available in this country, but because they have lacked opportunities here. And that's why they seek to make a better living of themselves, make something out of their lives, guarantee their children a future. I'm very disappointed, Mr. Speaker. I had last week a member of the lower house of the National Assembly insulting Kenyan women who are working in this country, saying that they've been picked up from brothels like Sabina Joy or Koinange Street, and that is where they've gone to work. Shame on that member, Mr. Speaker, because, Mr. Speaker, these are Kenyans who deserve dignity. I know very many Kenyans who have been brought up by parents who have gone to work outside this country and in Saudi Arabia, even as domestic workers. Mr. Speaker, they deserve dignity. They deserve respect, and we need to take care of them. And I will give you the context of this labor market that I'm talking about. Mr. Speaker, this search for better opportunities has increased human mobility, rapid globalization, open borders, technological advancement, and demographic challenges. In the case of Kenya, Mr. Speaker, our youth unemployment currently stands at 34.27%. That is according to the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics Economic Survey of 2021. Hence, a key driver to increase the number of Kenyans seeking employment in other major cities. Mr. Speaker, many people say, because Kenyans are highly sought after, that as a country that may not have rich mineral wealth, we don't have oil and gold under our soil. Our greatest resource is above the ground. It's our people. And that is why Kenyans who have gone all over the world have excelled in different capacities. They've been able to make us proud. In fact, many of them should be regarded as the true ambassadors and representatives of the Republic of Kenya. Mr. Speaker, let me narrow down. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates are documented as key labor destinations for Kenya's semi- and unskilled migrant workers. According to reports by the Ministry of Labor, at least 80, and I know the number is 88,000 Kenyans live and work in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Majority of them serve as domestic workers. We also have those who are skilled, and we visited some who work for the mobile company STC. Some work for, I think it's called Al Marai, the huge agricultural company there. Almost 5,000 Kenyans, 2,000 work in the telecom sector. Some are engineers. I remember meeting George Odongo, who works for the Saudi Metro, the rail system, which we of course have said that in Nairobi we need that mass transit system. The guys who did the Dubai Metro, those who did the Saudi Metro are Kenyans. So it's not just domestic workers. And I intend to bring them to Kenya when I become governor, God willing, inshallah. But Mr. Speaker, labor migration is viewed positively for many of them. And I must state here, and I want senators to listen keenly, out of the 88,000 Kenyans working in Saudi Arabia, many of them are very happy. They're able to send remittances. They're able to feed their families. A huge number, Mr. Speaker, are suffering. It might be small in terms of percentages, but anybody here will tell you even one life lost is one life too many. Even one Kenyan lady in distress is one Kenyan lady too many. If you look at the remittances that we receive as a country, and I'll give you an example, from those living in the diaspora, because it's played a vital role in our socio-economic development. In 2015, the Central Bank of Kenya reported that diaspora remittances amounted to $1.55 billion US dollars. That's excluding unofficial remittances. That represents 3% of Kenya's GDP. Further, the Gulf states and other countries contribute 18.2% at position number 3, Mr. Speaker. Number 3. In fact, mainly Saudi Arabia. Number 3 in remittances. That is after North America, after 50% of the share. Recent data between January and June of this year shows that remittances from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia are at third place after the US, the United States, and the United Kingdom. In that regard, there is an urgent need to streamline migration processes and governance to guarantee, secure, and protect the constitutional rights and well-being of all Kenyans, while at the same time leveraging on these gains. Mr. Speaker, this country, the Kingdom of Saudi, has more than 13 million non-Saudis working there because of the nature of their lifestyle. Currently, they're 88,000, and the goal, they say they would actually want 200,000 this year and maybe up to 1 million. If this is streamlined properly and we can take care of our Kenyans and ensure that, Mr. Speaker, we protect them, they earn a proper salary, they have their benefits, they can move around freely with their passports and with their documentation, it is indeed a frontier. But until then, there are certain measures this committee wants to convince senators to take for their benefit. It is needless to say that in the last 3 years, with the rising number of Kenyans leaving the country for domestic jobs in the Middle East, there's been a corresponding increase in distress calls by those alleging torture and mistreatment by their employers. For instance, as of 2021, and this is very disheartening, as of 2021, the Ministry of Labor reported 93 deaths of Kenyans, 93 deaths in the Middle East. And all of those reports, Senator Milgo will tell you, she's still around, they say it is heart attack, suicides, accidents. But we know there's more than meets the eye. Further, as representatives of the people, we continue to bear the brunt. Many members who have received distress calls, they call me. They say, who do we talk to? Yeah, when there's an issue. I've just had a discussion with Senator Zani. I've had members of the National Assembly. I remember our Senator Isaac Mwaura receiving dead bodies at Wilson Airport, or I think at JKIA. Senator Shionga gave me names. We receive these distress calls, appeals from constituents for assistance. But every day, if you go to the airport, you will find plane loads of Kenyans dressed in white t-shirts making their way. We must do something substantive as a house. They're looking up to us to resolve this matter. Some want repatriation of the relatives, afforded many. You have seen videos of people saying they're in distress, they can't get out of where they are. There have been media reports, and I keep saying we must balance these reports. Yes, we must raise that. And the reason for these interventions we are seeking, Mr. Speaker, is so that we safeguard the lives of Kenyans there and their interests and economic interests, but also we don't jeopardize that of those who are there and are happy to be there and are supporting their families. Some have built houses, they've educated their children, and we bring them back and they'll have no job. So that is why we are striking a very delicate balance. And I urge members to go through this report. I know the Secretariat has shared it on our platform. Just go through it with a fine-tooth comb. Mr. Speaker, it is therefore against the foregoing background that the committee, in undertaking its oversight and legislative roles in the case of labor migration issues, was part of the Kenyan delegation alongside the Ministry of Labor for a visit in the Gulf region. We undertook a study visit between the 10th and 20th of April, comprised members of both the Standing Committees of Education and the Standing Committee of Labor and Social Welfare. The goal was to review the existing bilateral labor agreements between Kenya and Saudi Arabia for domestic workers, and also in the United Arab Emirates, and to establish first-hand the goings-on in key migrant destinations, in strategic labor destinations in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. In view of the fact that these issues of labor migration are within the purview of the committee, and further considering the complaints, incidences, and claims linked to unskilled migration to the Arab countries, and aware of the economic contribution of labor migration to the country, the committee escalated its investigations. We did not stop at just visiting there. In our report, we reviewed existing opportunities and assessed obstacles for improved processes and labor migration governance, and subsequently, we have provided practical policy and legislative and administrative solutions to these problems. I know many Kenyans have been waiting for that report. We did not want to rush it. We came back. We have sat with different entities. We met with the Ministry of Labor and Social Protection, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Interior and National Coordination of Government, especially the State Department of Immigration, the National Employment Authority that actually vets and registers the agents who send workers, or rather facilitate the employment. We start with the recruitment agencies. There are two associations of these recruitment agencies. And while we, of course, acknowledge the efforts of the Ministry of Labor to implement certain specific activities in the course of 2021-2022, and whose objective is to enhance the labor migration processes and governance, we are concerned about the deteriorating conditions of migrant workers, particularly in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and we are of the opinion that the processes likely to protect life and welfare of Kenyan migrant workers supersedes all others and therefore must be prioritized. Mr. Speaker, while we were there, we met with the Ministry of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia on, I think they call it human resource, it's in the report. We met the mega recruitment agencies there. These mega recruitment agencies are huge companies that deal with recruitment from across the world. And it's important to note, Mr. Speaker, that even for you to be registered as a mega recruiter in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, you put a security deposit that is equivalent to 3 billion Kenya shillings. That is not what you're proposing for ours, but there must be a level of security deposit when a Kenyan worker leaves this country. They're insured, we have a guarantee of their flight back in case they want to leave. We know where they are staying, in whose family they have been recruited, and what contact numbers they have, so that in case of anything, we can contact our Kenyans while they're there. They must be protected. It is important to note, as I've said, labor is such a huge, and especially labor migration, is a huge potential economic frontier for this country. But our country lacks a comprehensive policy and legal framework useful to guide, govern, and create stability in the migration process. The fact that we lack that is not a secret. There is no labor migration law. There is no national migration policy, labor migration policy. I know we were engaged a few weeks ago with all these departments talking about a draft, but it's a draft that speaks very lightly on labor migration, which is the biggest cause of migration. We don't have migration from Kenya because of war. We don't have migration from Kenya because of hunger. The migration from Kenya is to seek out opportunities. And we saw, Mr. Speaker, case studies of other countries that are taking care of their people. Even in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, they have negotiated a country, government to government. They have even negotiated salaries. They have negotiated the rates of calling back home. They have negotiated the rates of remittances and the status of their people. A Kenyan living in Saudi Arabia, in Dubai, in the US, in the UK, is as Kenyan as a Kenyan living in Nairobi or Kisumu or Nyeri. They must be treated with the same dignity. The national migration policy, Mr. Speaker, has been in the works for a long time. And so we said, do we wait? And I'm glad Senator Mazawi is a member of my committee because he was there when we went through this. Do we wait for them to finish? And we know the policy process. Senator Wetangula has been a cabinet secretary. Before you even get it into a session of paper, to be discussed in memo, subcommittee, what, before it comes here, we're going to lose another 100 lives. Should we sit back and watch as leaders in this great republic? Or should we make comprehensive and substantive interventions based on the information that we have received as Parliament? So it is my hope that finally, when those policy documents and legislation are brought, we will be able to fast track their passage and enactment, but that we shall take action in the midterm, in the meantime. So this labor migration to key labor destinations has been going on in the absence of either formal agreements or MOUs for a long time. In fact, there is one which we are really pushing and waiting for, the BLA, the Bilateral Labor Agreement on skilled labor. Because they are looking for skilled labor. They're building a brand new city. We have engineers, we have electricians, we have masons, we have, all of these skills. But once we have a proper framework between us, they'll have opportunities there, Mr. Speaker. But even where those exist, the MOUs, they are weak and they're deemed insufficient in safeguarding the rights and well-being of Kenyan migrants. We've done comparative analysis with other countries. And this explains the numerous ongoing cases of abuse being experienced by those seeking employment in these countries. With a growing number of migrants to the Middle East, therefore, as a matter of priority, and I'm sure Ministry of Foreign Affairs are listening, Ministry of Labor is listening, and our agency is also listening. There is need for us to streamline processes for effective governance. Recruitment processes, the recruitment agencies, which are in their hundreds in this country, the pre-departure training. You find, Mr. Speaker, sorry, I will not do that again. You will find, Mr. Speaker, you'll find it's because when the Deputy Speaker sits there, she really sits. But I know I'm getting used to this. You find some ladies have been taken, domestic workers, during the month of Ramadan, and they say they're not being given food because they have not been trained of the culture and even the religious practices. Some of them have not gone to Form 4 or even to high school. And for deep in the village, in some parts of this country, there may not be exposure to different religions. And so they don't know how to take care of themselves, what time to get up to be able to prepare, etc. Just the cultural issues create such tension, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, issues of migrants' legal identification and registration. What happens in these countries when after the medical test has been done, the migrant worker goes there and gives birth? The citizenship of that child, Mr. Speaker. Those are questions that have arisen. And we discussed, our laws are different. If a child is found born in this country and whose parentage is not known, but is deemed below the age of 8, then they're assumed to be Kenyan citizens. But there's need to harmonize what our law provides and what these countries provide. Screening, assessments, referrals, enhancement and formalization of linkages between our ministries and the destination government ministries. Article 221 gives us the mandate, Mr. Speaker, to appropriate resources for various government agencies to implement policies and programs. And on the same breath, to foster safe, orderly, and regular migration in line with objectives, principles, and values of the Global Compact, of which we are a signatory to as a country. So we need resources. In this regard, Mr. Speaker, it is unfortunate that specific key migrant destinations like Jeddah and Riyadh, formal mechanisms, including and not limited to requisite consular services, consular assistance for self-improvement, well-being, and protecting their rights, are absent. Mr. Speaker, we lack safe houses. Other countries have safe houses in those labor destinations. Mr. Speaker, in the whole of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and you know the size of that country, we have one labor attaché, one gentleman called Juma. And Mr. Juma is so stretched and strained in dealing with it. Imagine the cases that come to you only as Senator of Laikipia, and you're here. What about the labor attaché there? He's completely overwhelmed. So some people think he's doing a good job, some think he's doing a bad job. He's been responsive every time we've spoken to him. But we need proper labor officers in both of those destinations, fully fledged, with those safe houses. Mr. Speaker, we sat down with the Kenyans working there themselves. We sat with those who've just come in, very excited and optimistic, and we got to exchange contacts. But a few weeks and months later, they started sending us distress calls, some of them. We also met a category, Mr. Speaker, which I will be very delicate in describing. They are called Kemboys. You know why they're called Kemboys? Because they've ran away from their contracts. They're Kenyans nonetheless, but they've run away from their contracts because there are some rogue agents there who come and tell you, Sister Naomi Shionga, you've been hired to this family at 50,000 bob. Now, there's a job for 150,000 job. Yet you've deposited your documentation. So she leaves that employment. But where she goes, and in that country, which is very strict, without certain identification, you cannot even get access to health care. We have had Kenyans dying at the gates of hospitals in Riyadh and in Jeddah. Mr. Speaker, these things that we should gloss over as a house, as leaders, surely. Will God forgive us for glossing over these things, or for only looking at the financial benefit that certain people are getting? God forbid, Mr. Speaker, let it never be said that in our time in this house, we saw such things happening. We got information from those involved. We sat with ministries from 2 states, a kingdom and a government, and we will gloss over such a report. God forbid, I will not be part of that. And Mr. Speaker, that is why this committee wants to take the move. Some may call it drastic. I've heard some senators saying that we are throwing out the baby with the water. We are not. Mr. Speaker, we are recommending as a committee that all labor migration of domestic workers, and I need to be very clear, the majority whip is distracting the seconder of this statement, of this motion. We're recommending that all labor migration of domestic workers from Kenya to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia be immediately suspended upon the passage of this report until the executive demonstrates that the following basic minimums have been put in place. The suspension is for a period until certain conditionalities have been put in place by the executive of the Republic of Kenya. Mr. Speaker, 1, we need the establishment of the status of all Kenyans currently in Malaz prison in Riyadh, Taril deportation center in Riyadh, Sakan, which is a new deportation center in Saudi Arabia, and all and any other prisons and deportation centers within the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, with the aim of repatriating them back to the country. The government must speak to the government. And one of these is someone who we met before they abducted him and took him. One Peter Callisto, a gentleman who had been part of what they call Jaliat. It's a community of Kenyans who come together to help. So if you find, for instance, that the sister I spoke about, Naomi, has those status, but she's in need of help. She's in need of health care. They come together, they fundraise, and they enable this person to get health care. They used to have a letter, and it's part of the recommendations, that would say, in as much as this person might not have documentation, this person is recognized as a Kenyan citizen, kindly accord them health care, first aid, emergency health care. Peter Callisto has been in deportation since we left Saudi Arabia to date. There are no charges against him. We want it to be established. Give us a full report and evidence of the complainant, because they say it is employer. His employer says they have not complained. It's the embassy that has sent him there because he allegedly organized demonstration. And also a lady called Lucy Wamaitha Ndiba. Mr. Speaker, they must give us the status of all the Kenyans in those 3 prisons and deportation centers, and why they're there, what they're there for, and whether a repatriation process of bringing them back can take place. Mr. Speaker, the government must tell us. Today I've just seen a video of bodies being removed which had not been found from a mortuary. Today I've been shown a video. They must tell us how many Kenyan bodies are lying in Shemesi mortuary in Riyadh. Number 2, the executive must establish the current status of all domestic workers in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, their contacts, their places of work, and set up a database and lines of communication between them and the labor offices at the embassy. And many of those are those who want to continue working. But until you've established that, even the employers know that there's no government watching me. I can mistreat this Kenyan the way I want to. I can do whatever I want to do to this Kenyan. There is a system called Musanid. And in the Musanid system, for all new labor migration of domestic workers, because it's part of our BLA, all that information is there. I can tell Mercy Waithera left Kenya on this date, landed in Jeddah, went to Riyadh, is living with his family, this is a salary, this is a contact. Our labor attaché in Saudi does not have access to it. And when we sat down with the head of Musanid in the Kingdom of Saudi, they said, no, these guys should get access. Because even they want to know which of their own citizens are abusing other human beings. There must be dignity in this world. Mr. Speaker, C, until we have the return of all current and former domestic workers who are in distress and stuck in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and want to come back. There are those who want to come back and they're not able to come back. That is a conditionality that must be met. D, suspended until the investigation and submission of a report to the Senate of the cases of Kenyan migrant workers whose deaths have occurred in Saudi Arabia. Apart from the number we were given almost casually, 93, without names, without proper reasons, we want a proper report. And amongst other things, this report on that issue must demonstrate the linkages between the labor attaches and the recruitment agencies in handling of distress calls and other complaints by migrant workers. Mr. Speaker, and without imputing improper motive on all the agencies, because I know some of the agencies are proper. But there's some agencies, because of the commercial nature of this, are sending girls away like potatoes. Because you're told that for every worker, domestic worker who is taken there, the agent receives $1,500 to $1,900. So what do? You rush and you collect people. You put them in a dormitory. I saw a news story the other day of Kenyans stuck somewhere in Thika. And they can't come out. They were told they were going to do different kind of work. Then they are told now it's domestic. It's become so commercial that we're seeing Kenyans as commodities. We're seeing Kenyans as commodities. So, Mr. Speaker, we need to see that attachment. And we have said that there must be fresh vetting and re-registration of all of the local recruitment agencies, with the vetting standards to be determined by the Ministry of Labor through the National Employment Authority. To this end, Mr. Speaker, no entity will be allowed to recruit Kenyan migrant workers unless this entity is registered and regulated in Kenya. Because there are also foreign entities that have come here and are taking the girls directly. Yet we have a law. I sponsored that law in the last parliament on the National Employment Authority. And the reason why we put in place there in the board, Foreign Affairs, Labor, we put, Federation of Employers, we put representations from the technical training institutes and the universities, was because to safeguard, to make sure that there's accountability when it comes to labor migration. We are not exporting potatoes. These are mothers. These are people's daughters. These are people's children. These are people's sisters. These are people who we must think of keenly as Kenyans worth dignity. Mr. Speaker, there must be an establishment before we reopen labor migration of domestic workers to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Fully fledged labor offices and safe houses. A safe house in Riyadh and a safe house in Jeddah, accessible to any Kenyan in distress until the status is established and able to be brought back. Mr. Speaker, we've had cases of where, and I know this will really prick Senator Abshiro because she has such a heart for such cases. A Kenyan domestic worker is being abused, goes to the embassy with her employer from that country, from Saudi. The case is listened to, and first of all, the complaints, this is alleged, but it could be true, is that immediately the stance is to take the side of the employer. And after she has said everything, she's told to go back with that employer as a process. What happens to that lady when she's gone back to that house where she's being abused? We need safe houses for them. What is the cost of putting up a safe house? With sanitation facilities, kitchen, beddings, human dignity, Mr. Speaker. So that must be done. If the formal recognition of the welfare associations of Kenya and Saudi Arabia, I've given the example. There used to be what we call jalayat. I hope I'm saying it right for those who understand Arabic. Kenya Jaliyat Group, who used to liaise with the embassy, and they worked very well. Incidentally, Mr. Speaker, they worked very well with the former ambassador who became Wajir governor, who this house impeached. But they worked very well with this Jaliyat. Later on, I think the system has broken down. So they are not able to respond to distress calls by these Kenyans. And until they can get the phone number of Senator Musuruve, who now looks for her chairman, Senator Sakaja, to sort it, we can't. So we must reestablish that. Mr. Speaker, G, or rather H, we must review the regulations of private employment agencies, including the determination of a minimum deposit and insurance to ensure the swift repatriation of any domestic worker in distress. Those are the conditions, Mr. Speaker, that this House, and that we're inviting this House to say emphatically, Senator Milgo, Senator Susan Kihika, Senator Ngugi, IG, Senator Naomi Wako, Senator Abshiro, Musuruve, that until these are met, let's not take our girls to a slaughterhouse. Until these conditions are met. Once these conditions are met, the other things that Mr. Speaker were saying, and the committee has recommended a raft, if you look at our report, of other issues that then must be taken into account, including our skilled labor, BLA, Mr. Speaker, including negotiation on the salaries, negotiation for leave days, because they're also humans, they're not machines, Mr. Speaker. Some of these timelines, Mr. Speaker, actually came from the ministries themselves. They must work together. In some of our interactions, we found the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has no clue about what the Ministry of Labor is doing. The Ministry of Labor has no clue about what immigration is doing. It should not take the Senate in a sitting of a committee to be the first time departments of government are sitting together to address this matters of life and death and livelihoods. It should not be. If they just look at the framework we provided for them under NEA, they are supposed to be sitting on the table together. What more important thing are they doing? So we recommend that the ministries address the current hiccups facing other critical processes, but not limited to pre-departure processes, medical checkups, and pre-departure training. Mr. Speaker, we need to be told how they are identifying which training or pre-departure, which institutions are being registered. So it's not about a cartel that I'm the one who has the schools of training. Mr. Speaker, to get your medicals, because they do medicals before these workers leave. But you're told there are only 2 or 3 centers that can do it. Why can't all our public hospitals be able to do this medical check and certify? And the Embassy of Saudi Arabia here, together with the Ministry of Health, can liaise to make sure that the standards required are the standards that they are adhering to. These people are going through so much. Mr. Speaker, I know you're a tough man. You're a tough man from Laikipia, but if you are there, you would shed a tear. Because you have a heart. You would shed a tear if you hear these stories. Mr. Speaker, I will add an addendum to the report that we tabled of the photos and videos I've received today. I will add an addendum so that members can see of correspondence, of emails, distress calls. I wonder how people feel. You have received distress calls, you have ignored, you have seen distress calls, and then you later hear a death announcement of that person who's been crying out to you for help. How do you sleep at night? Yeah? So, Mr. Speaker, in doing so, we intend that we'll have taken a holistic approach in addressing labor migration challenges. This suspension ideally is for 6 months because we believe in less than 6 months this can be done, even within the current budgetary framework that exists. And Mr. Speaker, we are saying here, because I know we also have colleagues who are there currently from the National Assembly, and they have been meeting these Kenyans who still talk to us, that we shall not take lightly any intimidation or victimization of the Kenyans there who have given this committee information. If there's information that is contested, then let them come and we keep inviting them to committee to contest that information. Mr. Speaker, we sat with CAS Ababu Namwamba, who has been leading this team. He was supposed to go to Saudi. I hope he went. He should meet these people. He committed to. We gave him the contacts. CS Chelugui, with whom we're supposed to go, but the government put restrictions on the executive traveling. He's supposed to go there to establish his status. But as the House that has the sole legislative authority, being Parliament, Mr. Speaker, I invite senators to support and adopt these resolutions that will go a long way in not just protecting these Kenyans, but enhancing our labor migration ecosystem as a country. Mr. Speaker, the committee, having considered the report on the status of labor migration, has proposed those policy interventions that members will see. And Mr. Speaker, I beg to move. Thank you. And I request that Senator and the incoming governor of Nakuru County, Senator Susan Wakarura Kihika, seconds this report.
Senator Susan Kihika.
Yes, Nisawa. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to second this motion. as a member of the Standing Committee, Labor and Social Welfare, and also as one of the members who traveled back in April to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, and saw firsthand really what our fellow Kenyans are going through out there. Mr. Speaker, this is an issue that really I would imagine most of us have encountered in one form or another, because it has been in the news, in the social media, and everywhere really, where we have seen a lot of distress calls by many of our Kenyans who are in those countries, and mostly really here I'm talking about the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, where we've had allegations of torture and mistreatment by their workers and that sort of stuff. So once we got there, but before we even got there, Mr. Speaker, it actually was interesting to get to the airport and see these very many groups of very young girls, generally, wearing some T-shirts with a company's name. And perhaps they were always at the airport every time I traveled, but I just had never paid attention, and this is the first time that I noticed it. But we came to learn that that is how the recruitment agencies loosely use the word ship them out or get them out there to those countries. And once they get over there, they are handed over to now agencies from that side. And I think one of the major things that we noticed was the disconnect once these Kenyans get to those countries. So that once they go to a certain family where they work, though I believe the agency from that country keeps up with them, a lot of the times the girls lose contact with their families, be it that they are not able to have phones where they can reach their families, or the families say that they do not know where these girls are. Another major issue was the fact that some of these families seem to take away the passports of these workers once they arrive, so that the workers are unable to, they can't leave. It just basically seems as though they cannot leave in most of the cases. Though we met a lot of the staff at our embassy at the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, we tried to get to the bottom of really what was happening. And initially, when you listen to it, everything just sounds fine and okay. But my very able chairman, the super senator of Nairobi, but my soon-to-be colleague of Nairobi County, City County, at the Council of Governors, was really alert and somehow had some Kenyans be able to contact him, and was also able to get more information outside of the formal setting of the embassy. And some of the stories that came across are really, we were actually in distraught. And even I recall when I see my sister there, Senator Shionga, on arrival back to Kenya, we found some girl at the airport with a small dirty paper bag, the clothes on her back, and basically seemed to have nothing else. She seemed as though she hadn't eaten for days, though I'm not a medical doctor or an expert on that. But from the look of things, she was really distraught, and she had no one to even take her from the airport to her home in Kakamega. Senator Shionga became a great detective and somehow managed, and actually that was during curfew. And I believe some boundaries or some borders had been shut down, so you couldn't even commute from Nairobi to Kakamega at that time. And so this girl sat in the cold airport. The agency that had sent her from Kenya to Saudi Arabia, we could not get them on the phone. And when Senator Shionga called, they were not responsive. So you could see there is a problem that when these girls are even deported or however way she got to get back to the country, she did not even have a penny in her bag to be able to get home. And this is a lady who had been out there working for a few years. So clearly there is a problem. My colleagues, I wish I had the ability to convey to you what we saw out there in a way that you would understand, so that you can understand how dire the situation is. I also recall us getting from the embassy a list of the Kenyans who had passed away, or those who had been, who are known dead, so to speak, and who are being brought back to the country. And what caught my attention, Mr. Speaker, was the fact that on those lists you would see, and I believe our numbers were, I think about 93 Kenyans died in 2021 alone. But what was surprising to me, Mr. Speaker, sir, is the fact that from the list, perhaps you would see, and this is just an example off the top of my head, you would see a list of 10 young women, maybe in their 30s, and all of them, every one of them, the cause of death would be a heart attack. And surely, I am not a medical doctor. I am as far from the medical field as can be. But even common sense would tell you that seems quite improbable. You cannot have that many people, every one of them dying of a heart attack at that very young age, and there doesn't seem to be, and then maybe by number 16, you'll see a road accident, and then you continue the next 14 of a heart attack, and I mean, it just really did not seem right, and it doesn't seem right. So really, there is a problem, there is a crisis, but what was clear was our migrant workers have been thrown out there without any support from our government. That is how it seemed. In a country where the balance of power is really skewed towards the employer, because we were told if you even went to report or you go to the police, you would go give your side of the story. Your employer would come and give their side of the story. But at the end of the day, you go back with your employer until they investigate. Or actually, when the migrant worker wants to return home, for whatever reason, she feels that she's not able to continue working in that household, and so takes off from the household, and say they are put in, the employer then files a case or reports that to the police. The migrant worker is then put in jail, and you cannot leave jail until that case is determined. They are not able to move the case forward. They are not able to get legal representation. So they become at the mercy of the employer who does not want to let you go. So, I mean, it's really just horrible. And some of these other ones, we have seen from their families. And since we went out there, since many of us are on social media, with our chair having a very huge following, most Kenyans were able to know that we were in Saudi Arabia. And so we received very, very many messages. And you would hear a parent or a brother or an uncle or a sister writing to us and saying, my sister has been sick, or we have been told she's in hospital, or we are initially told she's in hospital. The next day you are told she died, and there is no investigation, and we can't even, it just seems out of control, and we have lost it basically. But on hearing a bit about what the other migrant workers from other countries go through, or on comparing actually, you realize that places like Philippines have figured out their migration laws. They have figured out how to protect their migrant workers. Philippines, India are some of the very leading ones as far as that scenario. And what really caught my eye, or most of us, was the fact that those countries like the Philippines have safe houses, where if for whatever reason a migrant worker feels that they are in danger or they need to leave the household where they are working, and before travel back to the country, there is a holding safe house where they can stay safely until they are repatriated back to Kenya, or they are brought back to Kenya, sorry. So we don't have that. So our girls, we would also be told, would just sometimes be mistreated, as some would say. And on leaving the household, they would have to run away, because these people will report you to the police, so to speak, the employer. And we've had some cases where on their trying to escape, they have accidents and they die. So, I mean, it's really a horrible, horrible situation. And until we figure out, a comprehensive policy and a legal framework, it doesn't seem right to continue sending these girls, it's not just girls, but I say girls because generally the bigger percentages of girls, because it's most of them is domestic workers, but there is also men. We also were able to meet skilled workers though. There we saw some veterinaries, we saw some engineers who are working on the roads there, on the metro, who had, I think, come from Qatar to Dubai and then Saudi Arabia. So there were some good cases, but those were few and far apart, and mostly the skilled workers. But on these domestic workers, there clearly is a problem. And until we have a comprehensive policy and a legal framework, we will not be able to protect our migrant workers. And when we talk about 93 deaths in 2021, from those workers out there, and like I said, most of those deaths seem very questionable, then clearly there is a problem. I mean, we would have to be in serious denial if we were to say that everything is okay. So given all this and all that is going on, and Mr. Speaker, I will say that in my previous life, before I became a senator, I have done a lot of immigration law in the US. I was actually an immigration attorney. So when I look at this and when I saw that scenario out there, it begs the question, like we cannot as a country continue just throwing these migrant workers out there without any protection, without them being able to reach out when there is need for help. And then also, in a place where the laws may be a bit different from what most of our Kenyans are used to, or they know or are familiar with. So sometimes they find themselves on the wrong side of the law, and there is really no one to help them out. We did see that they had an office of the labor attaché, but there was only one, Mr. Juma. So there was only one for everybody in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And I'm talking about one when the numbers are about 90,000 domestic workers in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And those are the ones we know, because also it seems as though we don't have very good records. That is one of the things. Yeah. And we have the Kemboys there who, as my chair explained a little bit before me, are the ones who help them, they are said to help them run. But sometimes the workers are misled, the migrant workers are misled, and so they jump from the frying pan actually into the fire. So it's a really bad situation every which way. So we do have recruitment agencies from this side that are making some money off of these people. So mostly you also see a group of these workers who have who can't even really communicate. Even when we ask them the questions, some of them are not even able to communicate. So there must be better ways to do this than what is happening out there. So as a committee, colleagues, as a committee, having looked at all these issues and having seen what serious problem this is to our fellow Kenyans, to these migrant workers whose only crime is getting out there to go help put on the table. Most of them actually, because I remember we engaged quite a few of them, you find their single mothers who've left their children back here in Kenya, have gone to find greener pastures. Some of them, they say they're the ones who take care of their siblings, that is their brothers, their sisters, their parents, as well as the children that they have left behind. So for them to then be put in this kind of position, then it's really telling as a country when we cannot take care of the weakest ones in our country. And because by the way, migration also is not a dirty word. There is nothing wrong with us having Kenyans go out there and become migrant workers. But what we must do is it must be done properly. I mean, most countries do this. There is a lot of migrants that are imported, that the advanced or most advanced countries take in because they need the labor. But at the same time, as much as we want them to be able to find a place to make a living, it cannot be done at the expense of their lives. Like we cannot as a country continue to allow that. So having met as a committee with the different ministries, having tried to bring everybody to the table together, because it was quite obvious actually from the very beginning that there was a disconnection, that there was a disconnect, that the ministries did not seem, the Labor and Social Protection Ministry, Foreign Affairs, Interior, National Coordination, the Employment, it just seems as though there were too many loopholes. So we need everybody to come together. We need everybody to pull together. And based on that, based on many sittings where we have had many stakeholders come talk to the committee, based on us having talked to the actual affected people who are the migrant workers, we've also talked to the recruitment agencies and then these different ministries. Then the committee had the recommendations that are in the motion, and we as a committee urge this House, we urge you, our colleague senators, that this could be your sister, this could be your brother, this could be your mother, this could be anybody. And so we urge you, or sometimes actually some of us went in there and some found their cousins that they didn't even know were out there working. So we do not want to be too far removed from this. I appeal to you that you support the committee, you support this motion, and adopt these recommendations. And I am sure, because I have worked with all of you, I have seen how much you take into account those who are not able to stand up for themselves, or those who are not able to fight for themselves, how much you do stand up for them as a House. I pray and I urge you that one more time, please, stand up with this, stand and support and help pass this motion. Support and adopt the recommendations. Mr. Speaker, sir, I second.
Thank you, Senator Susan. I put the question that the Senate adopts the report of the Standing Committee on Labor and Social Welfare on the status of labor migration to the Middle East and proposed policy interventions laid on the table of the Senate on Tuesday, 2nd November 2021. Senator Kipchumba Murkomen.
Mr. Speaker, I thank you very much. First of all, Mr. Speaker, I have not had the privilege of speaking here when you are sitting on the chair. So I'd like first to congratulate you for being a member of the Speaker's panel. It's a position I'm very well familiar with, having served in the same capacity in the past, and I know you are more than capable to deliver now and in the future, even better, in a better, higher position. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the Committee of Labor and Standing Committee.
Senator Kipchumba Murkomen. Thank you for congratulating me, and I think I follow your footsteps because I was the chairman devolution as well.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, thank you. There's something, I don't know what you are looking for, but now the only remaining place you should be something is the majority leader. And congratulations, Speaker. First, I want to thank the Standing Committee on Labor and Social Welfare, and I have a lot of respect for Senator Sakaja and the committee he has and the work he has done. Mr. Speaker, the issue of labor migration to Saudi Arabia is something that has bothered this country for far too long. Even last time, we have, if someone can remind me her name, the nominated senator from Mombasa, Mbura. She was so passionate about issues related to domestic violence, or is that even domestic violence, actual violence meted on migrants by their hosts in Saudi Arabia. And it was something that was so dear in her heart. Before and even after he lost the position of senatorship. I still remember until like 2-3 years ago, she used to send me messages. I haven't communicated with her for now quite some time, but all her messages were related to the work she was doing or advocacy she had on the issues of migrants. Migrants to Saudi Arabia. And when we are discussing here, we are not removed from the reality that, Mr. Speaker, we are discussing about somebody's child somebody's daughter, somebody's sister, somebody's brother. And I know a lot has been highlighted about women and the way they are, and most of them, the victims who are killed from Saudi Arabia have been women. But I'm aware that it's not just confined to women. Men also are going through other forms of abuse in the same area, in the same countries, even though reports of death are not as predominant as men, because most of the people who are taken as domestic workers from other countries are not men, they are rather women. And men go there for other reasons other than working as in the home states of the persons who are living in that country. I am aware that ministry estimates that we have 104,000 Kenyans who are working in Saudi Arabia. It's also true, as this report captures, that for quite a long time, there's never been a clear procedure and mechanism for taking people to work in these countries, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Dubai, and many other countries in the Middle East. Unlike the situation in developed countries in Europe, where most of the migrants are working in the health sector, to Europe and US and Australia, most of them are recruited by agencies themselves in the other countries, and little is done by the agencies that are in this country compared to the situation in Australia and other parts, where our citizens apply directly to get jobs there through the links they have in Australia or US or Europe. Of course, the unique program that we have at the moment is the program that is taking nurses to UK, which is a government-to-government arrangement. And it's unfortunate, Madam Speaker, Mr. Speaker, that the ministry reported publicly that we could not be able to take advantage of the UK opportunities for nurses because of English proficiency among our nurses. I don't know the truth about this statement, whether really English proficiency is a big issue for our nurses, because nursing is a very rigorous program in this country, and by the time someone is qualifying to be a clinical officer, a nurse, or in the medical field, they have gone through very rigorous training that uses English. And I suspect that, Mr. Speaker, proper arrangement and preparation for the examiners, students who are going to be examined, was not properly done. And this is what is lacking. Even if you talk about the question of going to Saudi Arabia, what is lacking really is pre-preparation of those who are going there, in the training. It's also the involvement of the state in making sure that there is traceability. It is possible to trace the people who are going to serve in that country, which means, therefore, the government having a system and a database where we have the contacts of all Kenyans who are working in such countries, and they can be able to be traced at any given minute. So that when Kenyans come, because you see many Kenyans making very passionate appeal to their loved ones, to the state, that they really want to know the status of their loved one, because sometimes they get lost. Sometimes they send distress messages and they say, I'm hiding in a toilet, or I'm hiding somewhere in a bush, or there are no bushes there, but somewhere within the building of their domestic, of the people they're working for. And at that point in time, the government of Kenya, at a click of a button, should be able to call an agent or a government official in Saudi Arabia who can quickly get into the employer of these people who have gone to those countries, and be able to trace them immediately and tell them, we want to know the health status and the security of so and so, as required by the government of Kenya. Now, I don't know, Senator Sakaja, I haven't read fully all the report, but I have read the summary of the report. I don't know to what extent the committee was able to interrogate exactly these victims of violence, these victims. How did they go there? Because the information I have, and it may not be true, it is subject to confirmation, is that most of the victims are persons who went 5 years ago, when the systems had not been set by the Ministry of Labor. A lot of reforms have taken place in the Ministry of Labor. You know, Senator Sakaja, that the Employment Authority was established and operationalized less than 2 years ago. And It's under your bill, actually. And so the systems for registration and accountability for the agencies that are taking Kenyans to other countries is now operating, even though I am aware that they are still having budgetary challenges. The budget for the institution is yet to be strengthened so that they can employ competent staff who can perform this work of oversight and contacting the people who are going to out of the country. So the question you ask yourself is it really, is it true that the situation has improved in the last 5 years and that most of the victims are people who went 5 years ago? The other thing that is a little bit challenging in this report is, because I agree with most of the recommendations of this report, Mr. Speaker, as read by the chair and also as read by the seconder, Senator Kihika, the observation and recommendations of this committee are apt. But there are a few areas that, if you can see, Mr. Speaker, I totally agree on the part of lack of comprehensive policy and legal framework useful to guide this process. And most of the things that I have alluded to would be properly captured if we have a proper legal framework. Who are the people to establish the legal framework? Ourselves. And we either, the committee sits down and comes up with this legal framework, or works with the ministry and improve the ministry's bill and table in this house to improve the existing legal framework. Number two is that we are talking about the growing number of migrants to Middle East, and therefore we need to deal with recruitment process and recruitment agencies and their oversight of the same. And then this pre-departure training, which I am aware has already started. I mean, and a number of processes are going on. But what is the training manual? And what's in the menu of that training? How you are training this person so that they can be able to use which system to report, Mr. Speaker, their welfare or their status in the country where they are in. So we must have, first of all, put in place systems that can hold these employers accountable, so that then when you are doing the training, you are telling them about their rights and how they are going to enforce their rights. This migrant legal identification registration and the work of the embassy in Saudi Arabia, the screening, assessment, and referrals, all this has been captured by the committee. And the committee is recommending that in respect of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, that we must, Mr. Speaker, suspend, a part of the recommendation is to suspend migration to that country, labor migration, for 6 months. Now, that's where I have a problem. Because, and I depart and disagree with the committee on that particular recommendation. And these are my reasons. If you, the reason why we are in this mess now, Mr. Speaker, the reason why we are in this mess is because most of the migrant workers that are working in Saudi Arabia went there when the legal framework was not there. Okay? Number two, a number of them did not go formally through employment agencies. So even when you are holding the employment agencies accountable, you have these people who went there through other reasons. And Mr. Chair, and I want to convince Senator Sakaja, because we will pass this report formally and vote for it. But before we vote for it, we might need to sit down and see if we can amend that recommendation of 6 months. And I'm saying why. Once you remove the formal procedure of taking people there, I would rather we make the procedure, we work quickly to make the procedure difficult, rigorous, and accountable, than, Mr. Speaker, to say you close it completely for 6 months. What will happen is that there will be a black market. The black market will come in. People will move now through underground channels. Some will go in the name of going to hospital, visiting who, and all that. They will not have been trained. They will not be traced. And when they die, you cannot tell where they died, in which home. And in fact, they will even be exploited more, because they will be asked to pay a higher fee. Because now they will be told, you know, we are taking you with this 6 months. This 6 months is very difficult. You need to pay $5,000 for you to be taken to Saudi Arabia. And you will get a fantastic job and all that kind of thing. I think this is really the only provision that I would like to be convinced further or if possible to convince the committee that this is an area that we may need to look. Number two, if today we suspend migration for 6 months between us and Saudi Arabia, it's not something that the Senate can just do it and the ministry implements as it is. It involves diplomatic relationship between Kenya and Saudi Arabia. Because in essence, we are saying the official channels of government between Kenya and Saudi Arabia are unable to close the gaps that lead to most of our people dying. And by doing so, we are inviting a diplomatic conversation between Kenya and Saudi Arabia. Now, the question you ask yourself, should we do so through a closure of the migration for 6 months, or it would be better that diplomatic relationship?
What is it, Senator Sakaja?
Yeah, I'm willing to be informed, Mr. Chair. Of course.
Kabisa. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the remarks by Senator Murkomen, but I'd like to, just on that one point, because when I'm replying, I'll reply to everything holistically, that on the issue of diplomatic relations, this suggestion of suspending labor migration until we can assure Kenyans of their safety first came from the Principal Secretary in Foreign Affairs himself, the custodian of the diplomatic interaction, Ambassador Macharia. Himself said, since we really cannot guarantee their safety for now, why don't we actually halt it, sort out these issues, and it's not all migration. The migration of skilled workers can go on, migration for other reasons, for religious purposes, those who go for Hajj, to Mecca, and to other holy sites. But on this issue of domestic, and it's not just those who went 5 years ago. As I explained, there are ladies who we met who had just arrived. We got their contacts, and I'm sure Senator Kihika remembers. A few weeks later, they're the ones in distress. So it's not something that used to happen 5 years ago, it is happening. So the issue of diplomatic and the timeline, I think I've clarified. But in replying, and that's why I'm sitting to listen to all the members, I will be able to give more information. But the report actually speaks about all the meetings we had, if you go through it, and what the Kenyans themselves said. Thank you.
Okay, Senator, comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In fact, based on that information, because very useful information, I would be more interested, Senator Sakaja, to know to what extent also the committee, and I'm not saying you say it now, but in your replying notes and further conversation before we pass the report, we'll be interested to know to what extent the ministry itself, the Ministry of Labor, was involved in this process, and also, as I said, the Minister of Foreign Affairs. And again, Mr. Chair, it is important. One of the things that the government of Kenya has not given us comprehensive report is that so many people are dying and are being buried, but there is no situation where we've been given comprehensive report as to what caused their death. Were they strangled? Were they beaten? What is happening? What is the legal regime of Saudi Arabia? Again, the role of our Minister of Foreign Affairs cannot be overemphasized in this matter, because we want also the Minister of Foreign Affairs to be accountable. All other ministries of foreign affairs, including in Kenya here, do you know that if, Mr. Speaker, the American government would suspect that there was going to be not even terrorism, just that students of University of Nairobi were going to have a serious demonstration that would cause traffic jam in University Way? Do you know the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the US Embassy in Nairobi would inform their staff that be careful, don't cross University Way at this point in time, there will be a traffic snarl because University of Nairobi is going on strike or picketing or demonstration. But what is the role of our embassies out there? What is their duty in terms of identification and following up? I am aware, because I went to Dubai and I spoke to some local Kenyans who are there, and they're saying it's becoming impossible to get support from many embassies across in Middle East. When you go to an embassy to look for support, nobody cares. The attitude of the staff, the attitude of the embassy is deplorable. Again, what contributes to this abuse of our staff is the attitude we have with our foreign affairs ministry. If you go to the United States, for example, because it has many huge states, people even to renew their passports, they are just, taken round and round from their own, embassy. the attitude of servants who are serving in foreign affairs must change if we are going to be able to protect our people out there. And they must realize that they are the government. When they are sitting there, they are representing the government, and they are representing the welfare of the people of Kenya when they are sitting out of the country. Mr. Speaker, we also want to ensure that the Ministry of Labour deals with bilateral relationships. Even as we discuss whether to block the place or not, they must have bilateral relationship with the various governments of Middle East on this very important matter. And also the report from those bilateral engagements must be tabled in this chamber, in this house. Mr. Speaker, the greatest fear I have is that some of the Kenyans who are there, whether they are going to be disciplined in keeping with their contracts. You have a contract of 5 years, the 5 years is over, instead of renewing, you get lost into this black market I'm talking about. Then you become a victim of abuse. How again can we work out on a legal structure that will ensure that these people are identifiable? Mr. Speaker, I totally agree with all the provisions of this report. I only have a problem with the suspension for the 6 months, because I believe that it is going to endanger the citizens of our country who are going to be victims of a black market, and that you are going to worsen the situation in terms of identification and traceability of migrant workers to Saudi Arabia. Otherwise, Mr. Speaker, I congratulate the group, the committee chaired by Senator Sakaja and composed of many future governors. And I believe that when they become governors also, they will do everything possible to ensure that employment in our country is created, so that we don't have to come and discuss here of how we look for jobs in other countries and our citizens suffer in those countries. I hope Senator Sakaja, Senator Susan Kihika, and among other sure bets here. I haven't seen another governor, because Senator Olekina is looking at me in very pitiful eyes. But he is not running for governor of Narok, unless, of course, he intends to declare his candidature in a few years. So probably him and I will be here discussing these issues again and again. And I hope that by that time when we are discussing these issues, we'll be very proud of Senator Sakaja, now the governor, and Senator Susan Kihika, the governor. We should not be like others whom I don't want to mention their names. Do left this house professing, Mr. Speaker, preaching a lot of water, and then now they are drinking wine, Mr. Speaker. We must leave what we profess, and I hope that those of you who are going to be governors will do a fantastic job and take care of Kenyans, including those of us who remain here. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Kipchumba Murkomen, for your advice for the future governors. Senator Aaron Cheriot.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this chance to also present my thoughts on this very important report done by our Committee on Labour and Social Welfare, one of the very active committees in this House. I must commend them for diligently undertaking their work, ensuring that they always furnish this House with reports and documentation that supports the work that they have been doing each time. I wish we were all equally as diligent, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you know, Parliament works through its committees, and when a committee has the right leadership, these are the kind of issues that you respond to. On many occasions, you know, and I must say this because it's the truth of the matter. If you look through many of the issues that we struggle with as a country, it falls back to the leadership of the committees in Parliament. And this is in both houses, National Assembly and Senate. Because if you have a proactive leadership, chances are they will be able to find a way of wiggling through the challenges of modern day politics. We all understand about sometimes you try and push a certain agenda and you begin to get calls from here and there. But if you're an intelligent committee and have got the right leadership in place, then you will know what are the issues that you are willing not to compromise your values, to stand firm and ensure that at least you are remembered for something. This is a challenge to the rest of all of us in the committees that you all belong to. Each one of us here in this house belongs to at least maybe 1, 2 or 3 committees. Perhaps it's time that we ask now, as we begin to think about wrapping up our work on this session of Parliament, what is it that will be said to be our signature achievement as a committee? You know, and just ask yourselves for the amounts of money. You know, each year, and I say this because I serve in Parliamentary Service Commission, I know the amounts of money that we budget that goes to committee work in Parliament. It's the largest actually voted in our parliamentary books. And for the billions that we consume, then we need to justify the same with similar amounts of work where Kenyans can look back and say then it was worth having a parliament if they are able to solve our issues as they arise. To the specifics of this particular report, Mr. Speaker, I want to virtually agree with almost every recommendation that has been made by this particular committee. You know, the gold standard, Mr. Speaker, in terms of taking care of immigration workers is the country of Philippines. Philippines, Mr. Speaker, if you do a detailed study, 10% of their GDP comes from actually remittances by migrant workers. Their GDP is $361 billion dollars. Our GDP is a paltry 100. So it tells you that close to $40 billion, almost half of our GDP, just come from them organizing that sector so well, ensuring that each and every Filipino that works in each and every part of the world is protected, not by just the laws of the countries where they're working in, but even their own domestic laws. How did they achieve this? In the year 1995, Mr. Speaker, they passed the Migrant Worker and Overseas Filipinos Act that lists all these things that this committee is actually challenging us as a government, is challenging the executive to first put in place before we can continue with this business of ensuring that we have workers or Kenyans that are working outside, especially in this particular part of the world. You know, we don't have to worry a lot about, say, the Kenyans that went to work in the UK, the Kenyans that work maybe in other parts of the world, but there's a specific reason which maybe out of respect for our diplomatic friends, I wouldn't wish to delve much into. But we all live in this world, and we know that there are certain regions of this world where before you send your citizens to go work, then you must have a clear understanding with their governments on how these citizens are going to be taken care of, what rights they are guaranteed, what freedoms they lose, so that by the time somebody boards a plane at JKIA, they fully understand, first of all, what is expected of them, but also they know that they are protected as they work. Because, you know, let's face it, by the way, much as we are discussing and talking about, oh, you know, we produce human resource, why do people go out of your country to go and work outside? It's because you failed as a country, as a leadership. Otherwise, everybody will wish to work home. Actually, if forget even about outside the country, nobody would have even wished to work in this Nairobi. You know, if I was assured of a good, well-paying job in Kericho, good schools for my children, good schools, a good healthcare system, the same can be said about virtually almost every human being, because they say east or west, home is best. The same can be said of these workers that you're speaking about. It's not their wish that they leave, some of them very young children, to go and toil in the very stifling heat of the deserts of Saudi and Dubai. It's not their wish. But what do? Circumstances force them. I don't know if, I think it was Senator Susan Kihika who spoke about this particular issue. But I remember actually on my last travel out of this country, for a minute I felt embarrassed as a leader. Because the entire economy class of the flight that you were taking was filled with young Kenyans. Most of them young girls, 17, 18-year-olds or 20, who actually headed to the Middle East to do this kind of work. And to come and read in this report of the things that they are not assured of, that it tells you that, you know, they just make a practical choice and say, okay, what do? You know, in my community, we have a saying where we say, death is death anyway. That if you stay, you may die of poverty. If you head, Sorry? I don't think it's parliamentary. But if I may put in quote, they say, mad. Yani death is death. If you remain here, I die. If I go, I die. That's sometimes part of what some of these young Kenyans are faced with. Because they imagine you have a family here, you want to take care of. If you stay here without employment, instead of watching your kids die, then they prefer to go and toil in this particular part. Therefore, we as a leadership, this report is challenging us. And I want to challenge you, Senator Sakaja, that the report on its own is not enough. That we must study and replicate an act of parliament similar to what the Filipinos did in 1995. That will ensure that by statute and by law, before any Kenyan boards a plane to head to these particular parts of the world, we have signed the necessary diplomatic protocols with these countries of Saudi Arabia, Oman, and all these places that Kenyans are working. So that as our young people head to these countries to work, they know that much as we will respect your culture, we will observe your religious practices, we also are assured of our rights. Because that's one of the challenges that is being listed here, that many of them are barely literate, and sometimes they engage themselves in certain activities which maybe, this is debatable because you know Kenyans also have a habit sometimes of exaggerating things, that they didn't know that certain practices are not allowed. Let's just have a clear understanding. You know, this report goes to the even detail of just proposing that during these 6 months that I've had Senator Kipchumba Murkomen try to say that it might be a bit punitive. May I support this measure? That we are not saying that we will interfere with the work of those who are already in that part of the world. But at least before we send any more, that one, we sign and agree on what are the additional protocols and of safety and human rights observance between us and the governments that these people are. These agencies that are sending many of our young people to these countries, that also on their part, there are certain obligations that they are supposed to fulfill. That is not just a matter of once you put somebody, you know, there should be a difference between when you ship potatoes and flowers out of a country and when you ship human beings. Surely it cannot be the same. There must be more stringent rules and protocols that you meet before you get to that particular point of being satisfied that the young people that you're sending out of our country to go and toil are well protected and taken care of. So I support that particular clause on the establishment of a formal agreement or memorandum of understanding between us and the Middle East. Let us sign it. Let it come. Let these agencies have it written. Let them carry some obligations so that at least I know that if you're, because I understand this business, though not in much detail, but I know that many of the agencies that work on this side of the planet actually have a forwarding agency on the other side, which get a contract, then they subcontract the work to this particular work. Let them know that by the time you're entering into an agreement with company XYZ based in Riyadh, that company has fulfilled the requirements that will be in this memorandum of understanding, so that you don't send our young people, they go. I mean, what kind of employment? Slavery has been abolished across the world. If you check the UN protocols of work, free resignation and understanding reigns so high above any contract that you have with anyone. If you get to a particular point where you feel, I can no longer do this work, it doesn't matter what kind of contract you sign. It should get to a point where these Kenyans have this kind of choice, so that people know that maybe I thought life was better on that particular. If I get there and for one reason or the other I feel that I cannot stand this anymore, I should not continue to toil hard and be told that, oh, my passport was withdrawn, because those are the stories we hear. Let somebody know that maybe you need to serve a month's notice, you lose maybe part of your payment. That's part and parcel of what happens even here in Kenya. But let someone know that if you want to come back home, you can easily be allowed to come back home. Look at even this issue of the Kenyans that are in prisons. Some for offenses that perhaps maybe they just lacked legal representation. That if they could afford a lawyer, or even a state-sponsored one, because chances are, and I don't know, probably the committee should, because I've tried to skim through the report and I haven't seen through whether actually these Kenyans who are in this particular prison had legal representation when they appear before the courts of law. perhaps chances are they never got that particular chance. They couldn't afford, and therefore what happens? You're sentenced. Language barrier, all these challenges, and you understand what happens to you. Even you, Mr. Speaker, you are an elected member of parliament, but you know that whenever we travel outside of this country, you change even your mannerisms. Even for those that perhaps take one for the road. You know, even when you're in a bar, so long as you are not within your country, you don't do the usual things you normally do when you're in a country. Because you're afraid, and you know this is another land. I believe now if you can adjust yourself to that level, and you are a state officer, perhaps with state protection, that every country you travel to, the government of that country already knows that there is a Kenyan member of parliament in this country. Imagine what happens to a normal, ordinary Kipkurui or Cheruyot who has come from Kericho in the village and is now in Riyadh, working in a particular hotel. I mean, if they run into trouble, chances are their minds actually block out and they can't even defend themselves. Some of them are accused of things they haven't done. So, Mr. Speaker, this report speaks to a very important issue, a challenge of our generation. I support it in its entirety. Let us pause for that particular 6 months. I'm more comforted even knowing. But that, you know that PS Sakaja, I want to measure my words, but sometimes I see the things he posts on Twitter. I have my problems with him. You know, as a public officer, you cannot say the kind, because you remember at one particular time he made very interesting remarks about neighboring countries and the kind of thing. So if a PS of our government actually can tell a committee that put a stop to this, then it tells you he has abdicated his responsibilities. Because what PS Kamau should be doing, instead of telling you to put a post, he should have come before Parliament with a draft policy for you to approve for him. And it means he has given up on his duties, and now he's saying, oh, please save us. But maybe, unless there's something else, because I know, Kenya, anywhere where money is involved, the amount of interest that are there, because this is big business. We are not talking about small money. We are talking about serious money that is at play here. That's why people don't want to. Actually, Kenya is one of those countries where if you see anything chaotic, it's not chaotic because there is lack of order. It's what is called organized chaos. It has been made to look that way so that people can make money. So don't think that these people, the ministry officials at Ministry of Labor and those embassy officials that you're talking about, that they don't know these things that Senator Sakaja and his committee are proposing. They perhaps had it long before Senator Sakaja was born, because some of them are very old. But they want it to be the way it is so that they can continue benefiting. Let us close that window so that we give dignity to Kenyans, we give them the protection of the force of law, so that by the end of those 6 months, when we open up our engagements with these countries in the Middle East, Kenyans can be comfortable, know that we are safe, that we are going to a country where tomorrow if I disagree with my employer, I have a formal process, I have a toll-free number that I can be able to call my embassy and say, I have run into problem. You see, organized countries do this even for very specialized skilled officers. If you go to, say, United Arab Emirates, those pilots that you see fly those big Boeings of Emirates, they have these facilities available to them because they understand how the Arab man is. If that facility can be made available to a pilot who is literate, who actually is in his hand handling a machine that is worth billions of dollars, imagine how much it is needed by a Kenyan officer who's earning maybe $300 or $500 in a month. They need it more than each one of us. But the reason those other countries provide it for their citizens is because they know that in certain regions of the world, you need this kind of arrangements with them. You need to sign the protocol. Saudi Arabia as a country need to sign on it and say, we will ensure that Kenyans are allowed in their consular office to have this kind of relations, so that when you get to that particular country, it is known. We can, forget about these stories where we are being told majority of them now, the embassy knows where they are. It should even be a way of regularly checking up on them. Maybe a monthly filing from them, just a way of ensuring that a roundup check and saying, Mr. John Kinyua, we know you are in Mr. Mansuk's house. Please confirm for us whether you are okay and work is going on well. And you just click your reply and say, yes, I'm fine and I'm enjoying what I'm doing. It's the least you could do for our citizens. These people toil for hours on end and they send virtually almost 90% of the money they earn back to our country. That's why foreign direct remittance is actually beating even our agriculture. It's because of this kind of workers. Surely, you want to tell me that if as a country we made a decision to just do the right thing for them, we will suffer any prejudice? I do not think we will do it, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, I support the report in its entirety. Let us implement it as drafted. I have nothing useful to add other than what was done by this committee. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Cheriot. Senator Abshiro Harake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to support the report by the Labour Committee and to congratulate them for a really fine job that they've done. The issues around the inhumane and degrading conditions that Kenyans, especially in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, have been subjected to is not something that is of yesterday. These are issues that have been with us for very long, but I'm glad that the committee has actually prioritized this and done a good job of it and has gone beyond just political pronunciations to specific recommendations and measures that we as a House can take to make sure that we mitigate, we protect, and we implement some of the recommendations that have been advanced in the report. Mr. Speaker, I would like to congratulate committees of this House. This House is becoming an area that is becoming a protection for this country and for this nation. Mr. Speaker, while not all committees are probably at the same level, this House is now becoming where Kenyans come for help of last resort. Mr. Speaker, I am very familiar with the issues around protection for migrant workers. The International Organization of Migration has documented really serious, degrading and dehumanizing conditions that Kenyans and others in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia have gone through. The Human Rights Watch has very robust reports in terms of what protection measures that should be taken. Our country has signed and ratified certain international labor laws. I'm not sure which, but we need to find out which we've ratified. But that having been said, I want to ask Senator Sakaja to go beyond even just this House, to actually bring all these ministries together, maybe in a committee of the whole, where the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Labor, the Ministry of Gender, because again, very apparently, the women are being disproportionately, young women especially, and our girls are disproportionately affected by this inhumane treatment as migrant workers, and they have special needs. If they could be brought here so that nobody says it's this person or points fingers at others, then we have this House then interrogates what is it they are going to do and assigns accountability on the basis of the recommendations that have been put in that report, so that then we know we've done our job and we have assigned accountabilities as appropriate and left them to the job is on their part. So I hope that is one thing that you can do, Senator Sakaja, because you have really done very well to go beyond just the kinds of debates that we do, because this is more than just talk shop. You've done very well in terms of making this a motion and in terms of having very specific measures. I support even the suspension of the 6 months, because really we need to get this right. COVID is still with us. I am aware that the detention centers in Riyadh, where you've gone, Jizan and the rest of them, are in deplorable conditions. And we know that the highest number of people that occupy those detention centers is Chadians, Nigerians, Kenyans, Ethiopians, and Somalis, in that order. Now, for us to be even among some of the nations that are in upheaval, and for us to be with these nationalities and languishing with them is unacceptable, because as our country, we pride ourselves as a democratic, fairly advanced, not even lower income country. Now we're a middle income country. And for us to be amongst these nations, which perhaps have challenges, what is our excuse? Other than just being negligent of the protection that is supposed to be our duty as a nation, as a state, and our constitution. Mr. Speaker, you know, Saudi Arabia is one of the richest countries on planet Earth. It has no excuse putting people in such deplorable conditions when it could afford to give people certain dignities and certain basics. when they're putting people in those detention centers. I know Senator Cheruyot was asking that did the country not provide lawyers? There's sometimes when that is not even an option, because it is detention without trial. It is detention that sometimes people are not even aware of. I know that detention centers in Jizan, for instance, are where people are just thrown in there. Sometimes people are not even aware. But what does that mean? Our Ministry of Foreign Affairs, our consular section, if we have any, because I've worked in an embassy and I know the number one work of the consular section of any embassy is the protection of its citizens. And when people, in fact, set foot on an aeroplane, the embassy will send you something for you to register with the consular section so that your whereabouts are known and your protection and your rights are guaranteed, because your country is caring about you and cares for your protection. I don't know if our country has ratified certain international conventions, like the 1990 International Convention on the Protection of the Rights of All Migrant Workers. The torture and cruel, inhumane, or degrading treatment in international law is guaranteed in the UN Convention Against Torture. I don't know if we have signed to that, but we're very good at signing and ratifying international laws to which we don't adhere, which we don't domesticate, and which we do not even then remember that we have signed up to them. So I think what we need to do, and maybe a recommendation that I'd wish to be added to this, is that we list all the international conventions that provide protection for international migration and international migrants, and see to it that we as a country also ratify them and sign up to them, so then if we don't have the local laws supporting us, we could then go to the international laws that perhaps could give us a second checks and balance. Mr. Speaker, with those few remarks, I don't wish to go into this too much. I want to also acknowledge the work that the former Senator Emma has done. She's been crying out. She's been activist about this. She's been very passionate about this. I know she's been in touch with me severally, and she's highlighted to me a lot of issues herself. Sometimes as women, we end up doing small little harambes to try and rescue one or two girls, but that is not enough, and that's not the job of a senator to do. The job of a senator is to make laws, and I'm sure that Senator Sakaja and your team, we will all be part of maybe whichever legislative frameworks that will ensure that formal structures are put in place to protect our girls, our boys, and our people and our migrant workers. Again, just as the last point, I have been to the Philippines.
What is it, Senator Sakaja?
Yes, I would like to be informed.
Mr. Speaker, just really to inform Senator Abshiro as well as colleagues on how live this matter is. Just now when Senator Abshiro, you've been talking, I've received a message from a gentleman called Majanga, and he says, Mheshimiwa, I have an issue for my brother who has died in Saudi Arabia 2 months ago. Kindly, how can you help me bring this body back home? Vihiga County, Sabatia. And I'm sure many members received this. It's a really live issue. If you can just, we must focus on how to sort this thing out. So I thank you for what you're saying, just to inform you that those distress calls are coming without any framework for dealing with them.
Thank you, Senator Sakaja, and this is the reality. We cannot be just repatriating dead bodies back home when we should be providing the protection so that our people's lives matter, that our people's lives outside of these borders. Anybody has a right to go and work anywhere in this country and or outside of this country. It is our international right, and they could go and do that. In fact, the Philippines has put mechanisms in place for labor export. And as senators have said, it is the #1 earner of the external revenue and of their foreign exchange. It is a legitimate, organized, and well done international labor migration is a very legitimate labor force. It's a very legitimate and dignified way of earning a living. But what's not okay is for our country to just neglect its citizens and not provide the protections that is guaranteed in our constitution and in our laws. Mr. Speaker, in just last few months ago, you will find that in those detention centers, especially during, and I've had the pleasure of working with Senator Sakaja on the COVID committee, and I know he cares enough to have supported even the protection of the migrants, the people who had gone out of the country and could not come back during at the height of COVID, is that in those detention centers, you'll find that people have contracted COVID, but then, and there are videos to this, and I'm sure he's talked about the addendums, and these addendums are part of this, is that the Human Rights Watch has compiled cases of people where people have contracted COVID within the detention centers with no services that have been provided, and with the country is not even aware. You will never hear a citizen of the United States of America or Canada or any of these countries being put in those detention centers. The reason being, the consular sections of these organizations and these countries are on top of the welfare of their citizens. It's about time we also did that. There is no reason why we pump so much money into our foreign offices when then, and I don't understand why there's one labor officer when the largest number of migrants in Kenya go to Saudi Arabia. Where is the priority here? So I think, Senator Sakaja, please, let's have all these ministries come to this house to be given this work, these accountabilities to be assigned to them with clear timelines as to when and how these things are going to be done. Of course, it's okay within the 6 months, yes, but it's not enough to say that in the last few years there's some reforms that have been done with our labor laws or in our labor ministries, because as we speak, the situation is still the same and actually getting worse by the day. So I support and look forward to the implementation of some of the recommendations that you've made. Please also check for us that we have ratified and are also part of the international labor organizations and international conventions that will give us at least a backup should we then fail as a nation to look to do these things. I support and I congratulate you.
Thank you, Senator Halake. Senator Gertrude Msurube.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to support this this report that has been brought on the floor of this House by Senator Sakaja. And I congratulate Senator Sakaja for coming up with this report and letting Kenyans know exactly what is happening to migrant workers who are out of this country. Honorable Speaker, I certainly acknowledge that there is scarcity of jobs. And I certainly acknowledge that, yes, people want to make a living. Everyone wants to make a living, Honorable Speaker. At one point, I remember when I was at Jomo Kenyatta Airport, and I was on transit, I just saw a number of ladies, very many of them, they were wearing jeans. In fact, all of them were in jeans and T-shirts. They were on their way to Saudi Arabia. But, Honorable Speaker, something surprising is that when it comes to being cleared, they were being cleared very fast, abnormally fast compared to other people. It is unfortunate that when women go out there, they are going to make a living. I know a woman can go to any length to ensure that he provides food, shelter, and the basic necessities to her children. And most of these ladies who are going, they're not ladies from Nairobi. Most of them come from the rural areas. Honorable Speaker, when I was in Lugari last week but one, a case came to me that there's a lady who went to Saudi Arabia and she's being mistreated. They don't know how she can come back and all that. This is just one among the very many that Senator Sakaja has let this House know. Most of them are ladies, Honorable Speaker. And you can imagine, this report by Senator Sakaja is very emotive. That you can imagine your daughter, and Baba Emily, I know, you can imagine Emily being in Saudi Arabia, being maltreated. But when she's being maltreated, there's nothing you can do about it. It is painful. And And I want to say, Honorable Speaker, as also a mother of daughters, very beautiful daughters, I really feel the pinch. I can imagine those daughters of mine trying to make a living, to support their children, to support their loved ones. But when they go there, they get maltreated. It is an issue that is of great concern. And Senator Sakaja, I want to thank you also, you and your team, for the recommendations that you've come up with. These recommendations must be a prerequisite for working in the United Arab Emirates. Honorable Speaker, when you look at the Constitution, Article 43, socio-economic rights, whether you are a migrant worker or you are living in Kenya, you have a right to social economic rights. You have a right to the highest attainable standards of health. You have a right to clean water. You have a right to housing. You have a right to social protection, Honorable Speaker. And it is even clear in Article 43(3) that the state needs to provide social security even for those vulnerable Kenyans who are not able to provide social security for themselves and their families, Honorable Speaker. That Kenyan migrant worker who is in United Arab Emirates is helpless. He doesn't know what to do. And Senator Sakaja put it rightly, that sometimes a situation can be that a Kenyan is complaining, but when he goes for his case to be listened, at the end of the day, he is made to go back with his employer. So you can imagine what they would go through, Honorable Speaker. Cases of death have been reported in this report. We cannot rest on our laurels. As senators, we must do something, Honorable Speaker. And we are obligated to do that, Honorable Speaker, because we represent millions and millions of helpless Kenyans who do not know what to do, Honorable Speaker. And Honorable Speaker, I remember at one point when I went to Dubai, I had an interaction with some Kenyans. And they mentioned that there are some Kenyans who go to the United Arab Emirates. And sometimes they get stranded. Since they get stranded, they cannot come back to Kenya because their visas have not been cleared. Some of them end up doing engaging in illicit behavior in order to survive, Honorable Speaker. Constitutionally, every Kenyan must be treated with dignity. Whether migrant or not migrant, all Kenyans have a right to be treated with dignity, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, there is need to ensure that when Kenyans are going out there, and this is a report that came, a recommendation that came out from the Senator Sakaja-led report, that there is need to have a biodata of those who are going out there. There is need to find out where are they staying. There is need to find out about their well-being, their health care. Are they okay? Are they being housed? And so on, Honorable Speaker. As senators, we cannot play the ostrich at a time like this, Honorable Speaker. When we want to ensure that we are creating employment, Honorable Speaker, even to our fellow Kenyans, Honorable Speaker, exporting labor is good. It is a plus for this country. But Honorable Speaker, when you're exporting the labor, we need to ask ourselves, because it has been very clear that the committee found out that there are skilled and unskilled laborers who actually go to the United Arab Emirates. There's need to find out, even when we are exporting labor, how are these migrants being treated? We also have labor laws, Honorable Speaker. Are the labor laws being adhered to even when they're out there? Honorable Speaker, it is just in order that when you work hard, your salary is equated to your hard work. But it is unfortunate, Honorable Speaker, that when migrant workers go out of this country, their salary is pathetic, Honorable Speaker. They're not even able to support their families rightly. And even in some areas, Honorable Speaker, they're not even allowed to stay with their families You can imagine, Honorable Speaker, you're out of the country, you cannot even invite your wife to come and stay with you, you're actually alienated from your family. You're alienated from your children. You're alienated from the society. Honorable Speaker, there's need for the raft of recommendations that have come on the floor of this House to be implemented, Honorable Speaker. There's need to ensure that we know where our fellow Kenyans are going. We know what they're going through. When it comes to the demands of the Constitution, are their constitutional rights being violated, Honorable Speaker? We must be our brothers' keepers, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I want to say that it is absurd and something unthinkable that people can die. Our fellow Kenyans can die, yet there's nothing we can do about it. That our fellow Kenyans can complain, yet there's nothing we can do about it, Honorable Speaker. We must be the Senate that is going to make a difference with regard to coming up with policies, implementing the labor policies that ensure that when it comes to workers, they are treated fairly, Honorable Speaker. The committee has even said, Honorable Speaker, that even for the workers who go out there, the agencies are paid $1,900 US. It is unthinkable. Honorable Speaker, I can imagine that the agencies are also making a living and they want the agency businesses to mushroom. So they may not even care whether the Kenyans are going to be mistreated or not, Honorable Speaker. We cannot sacrifice the life of Kenyans at the expense of the dollar, Honorable Speaker. I refuse, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I want to say, Honorable Speaker, that it is well-meaning and it is in good breath that Senator Sakaja-led team has mentioned that after presenting this report, then we should bring the curve down of migrant workers going to the United Arab Emirates until we are sure that when they go there, their socio-economic rights will not be violated. When they go there, they should even be allowed to get married, Honorable Speaker. Marriage is an institution that is very important, Honorable Speaker. And even when they get married, even when they're there, Honorable Speaker, their children should go to school, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, it is unthinkable that someone can work somewhere, but you cannot have a family, that you cannot take care of your family. And I remember at one point, Honorable Speaker, I visited also a Kenyan who is close to me, Honorable Speaker, when I was in the United Arab Emirates. But she was telling me that you cannot sleep here. They are not allowed. You just visit and go, Honorable Speaker. So I want to say, Honorable Speaker, the right to be free, the right to socialize with your significant others should not be infringed in the name of employment, Honorable Speaker. And I want to say, Honorable Speaker, and I even want to say so that Senator Sakaja knows that we are not refusing to export labor. Because we have to acknowledge that there are Kenyans who are skillful, but sometimes they may not have the employment here. But what we are saying, even if we are exporting the labor, let us be certain that the labor we are exporting, skilled or unskilled, is not maltreated. That people are not treated like slaves, Honorable Speaker. Gone are the years when we were slaves, Honorable Speaker. And when we got our independence, we are certain that we are free, Honorable Speaker. So we cannot decide that we are going to have migrant, laborers only to become slaves wherever they are, Honorable Speaker. And I want to say, Honorable Speaker, even the embassy in the United Arab Emirates, Honorable Speaker, should be brought to account, Honorable Speaker, so that there's a mechanism of ensuring that, migrant laborers who are Kenyans, who are being mistreated, are actually rescued, Honorable Speaker. We have been talking about rescuing the girl child here in Kenya, Honorable Speaker. The migrant workers who are there, the girl child who is there, who is being exploited, who is being maltreated, needs to be rescued also, Honorable Speaker. She is a Kenyan, just like anybody else, and she needs to be protected, Honorable Speaker. So I want to say that the state should come out clearly and ensure that they are fulfilling, implementing Article 43(3) of the Constitution of providing social protection for that helpless Kenyan, Honorable Speaker. And I want to say, Honorable Speaker, that as Kenyans, And not only Kenyans, as the senators, we should also insist that even before the agencies that are taking our children to United Arab Emirates, they need to take them through orientation, Honorable Speaker, because some of them go through culture shock. Someone has just mentioned about Ramadan. And you know, Honorable Speaker, if people have a timeline of eating, you know, you'll take your breakfast in the morning at 10 o'clock, some tea, and especially, you know, from Western, you take tea in the morning, you take lunch, you take 4 o'clock tea, then you take supper. And then all of a sudden you're told that you cannot eat now. There are hours to eat. So there is need for orientation, Honorable Speaker, to avoid culture shock. Because culture shock can be very stressful, Honorable Speaker. And I want to say, Honorable Speaker, I do not blame the migrant workers who are there. And I commend them for taking a daring move of going out of the country to ensure they are making a living, of going out of the country to ensure that their children are having school fees, of ensuring also they even give protection, you know, afford a home, afford the, you know, the basic needs to their families and their significant others. I commend them for that, Honorable Speaker. But I'm calling upon the state to ensure that it is coming out fully fledged, to ensure that the Kenyans who have gone out there to make a living are not being maltreated, Honorable Speaker, are not living like slaves, Honorable Speaker. As a Senate, we should not rest on our laurels until this case that has been brought on the floor of this House comes to a conclusion, Honorable Speaker, and a favorable conclusion that will ensure that when Kenyans go out there, they work in good working conditions. When it comes to salary, they're paid well. When it comes to leave, they're also paid, you know, money for leave, and they're also allowed to come back to the country, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, it is unthinkable that even Kenyans who go out there, they're not entitled to leave. It's not automatic. Some of them are entitled to leave after 2 years, Honorable Speaker. You can imagine being in one place for 2 years, then you'll be allowed 1 month to go and see your family, Honorable Speaker. This is something unthinkable, and we must ensure, Honorable Speaker, that when it comes to foreign issues, when it comes to employment, then whoever is taking Kenyans, you know, to work for them is not subjecting them to any form of abuse, Honorable Speaker. I support this report that is Senator Sakaja led, and I hope that it will see the end of the light at the end of the tunnel, Honorable Speaker, so that at the end of the day, a Kenyan is free just to go and work out there. A Kenyan is free even to be visited by his family. A Kenyan is free, Honorable Speaker. So I want to support this report, and I believe, Honorable Speaker, that it will see light at the end of the tunnel.
Stewart Mazaa, hoja ya nidhamu ni gani?
Bwana Spika, ingekuwa vyema kama ingekuwa kuna wengine katika mstari wanapendelea kuweza kuongea. Lakini tukichukua mtu mmoja ikichukua dakika zitakuwa nyingi zaidi. Kama ingekuwa inawezekana ingeregeshwa ikakuwa kama dakika 5 hivi. Ama dakika 3 hivi ingekuwa vizuri zaidi, ili kila mtu aliyeko hapa ndani, kila senator apewe nafasi ya kuongea. Asante Bwana Spika. Hiyo ni kwa hisani yako.
Okay, asante. Kwa hivyo kila senator, kwa sababu Senator Cherargei.
Why Senator Langat?
No, that's on a point of order.
On a point of order, looking at the gravity of this report and the sensitive nature, and I think every county has been affected by this. Even personally, like 3 months ago, I lost 2 young women from Nandi to do unclear circumstances. So it is a very sensitive. So I request that it should give 10 minutes, because this is a very serious matter. And Mr. Speaker, the people we are discussing is the top #1 foreign exchange earner. This is a very serious. I told you in 2 years, 2020 and 2021 financial years, 19 and 20, they sent over 780 billion to Kenya. So I think that is what we can say. Why is Senator Ladamo Lukina behaving as if he's adding chaos? So, Mr. Speaker, I beg to
Senator Olekina.
Mr. Speaker, respect is paramount in this House. As a distinguished senator, I'm really embarrassed for my colleague, senator from, which county is he from? Nandi. From Nandi. You know, really, I am sitting here, I have not uttered a word, and he has the audacity to utter words which are really, really unparliamentary. I really would like you to ask him to withdraw and apologize.
Senator Samson Cherargei of Nandi, can you withdraw and apologize?
Mr. Speaker, as I apologize, Senator Ledama should at least in future avoid shouting across the aisle. I withdraw and apologize. Okay, thank you. Proceed.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
And you had said,
in summary, I support this statement.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I have listened to both sides. I have heard Senator Samson Cherargei saying 10 minutes. I heard Senator Olekina saying 5 minutes. So we go for 7 minutes. Senator Haji.
Mheshimiwa Spika, kuna wale ambao wataka kuongea kwa muda mrefu. Hatuwakatazi kwa sababu ni haki yao ya kidemokrasia na ni haki yao katika bunge hili. Na kuna wale ambao wataka kuongea kwa muda mchache. Kwa hivyo kuweza kupata ile uwiano, wale ambao wataka kuongea kwa muda mchache, Mheshimiwa Spika, wapewe nafasi waongee, waondoke. Wale watakao dakika 10, 20 watamaliza. Yes.
Senator Haji, tayari nilikuwa maamuzi nikasema ni dakika 7. Senator Stewart, Senator Naomi Shionga.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I congratulate you. It is Naomi, I think I had it right. Maybe clarification on the names?
Kama siku hizi Naomi haitwa Naomi Stewart ama haitwa namna gani? Bwana Spika, umechanganya majina hapo. Kama unaweza kufafanua kwamba ni Senator Stewart Mazayo kutoka Kilifi ama ni Senator mteule Naomi Shionga?
Ninasema mimi namuita Naomi Shionga. Pengine nikuteleza kwa ulimi.
Thank you, Speaker. It is not Stewart, it is Senator Naomi Shionga. Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, I want to stand and I want to thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to support our own report of Labour Committee brought on this floor of the House by our able chair, Honorable Senator Sakaja. Speaker, I rise to say that I'm a member of this committee and I got an opportunity to travel to Saudi just to witness what fellow Kenyans are going through. Mr. Speaker, the opportunity gave me an eye-opener on what is happening out of the country for our children, citizens of Kenya who have gone to look for greener pastures. And as many say that people go out to look for greener pastures, Mr. Speaker, I want to tell you it is a dark pasture because they go to look for graves. It is no longer as you were that people go to look for greener pastures, especially in the country of Saudi Arabia. Mr. Speaker, many countries or states have different powers of leadership and they believe in their governance and their citizens and their policies and acts that govern their citizens differ from one country to another. But I'm very certain with the policies and framework Kenya has between the country or the kingdom of Saudi Arabia and Kenya, putting into consideration, Mr. Speaker, that Kenya has a Ministry of Foreign Affairs which takes care of the people in the diaspora, amongst other responsibilities. We had an opportunity as a committee, Mr. Speaker, as the chair said in his report. We had an opportunity of interrogating all the stakeholders that take care of the issues that govern the people of Kenya when they are in the diaspora. But what we came to learn, people are making billions of money from our people here in a name of recruiting them, especially the recruiting agency. I speak this with a lot of heart, a lot of sadness, and a lot of bitterness in my heart. Because many of our people who go in Saudi Arabia there, they don't come back, and they are unaccountable. One of the things that our chair said, it is true that we do not have a database to analyze, and a whole ministry like Ministry of Labor, which has a mandate of knowing how many people are out of the country on a particular day going to look for jobs outside in another country. Kenya doesn't have. It is not even sure in the embassies, in the High Commission. The same applies even with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and even the stakeholders. Things are being done in Kenya, vice versa. Mr. Speaker, I want to say that most of our migrants, sincerely speaking, they are lured into this because they are promised heaven when actually it's a dead stone. Mr. Speaker, the status of poverty, the status of family breakdown, background, and the status of change of livelihood is leading our people, or is enabling our people out there without knowing. And we have this, the so-called the recruiting agency. These recruiting agents, as you have heard, Mr. Speaker, they cheat on Kenyans that they train and sensitize our young ladies, our young youth who go out to look for these jobs. They are liars. They lie to Kenyans that they trained them. The only thing they do is that they just try to, I don't know which language I can use. Let me just use a Kiswahili kidogo. Wanawapaka mafuta kama wa Kenya. Wanatupaka mafuta. It might be because I'm just saying, let me use a little bit of Kiswahili.
No, you have to be consistent.
Okay, I'll be consistent. They just oil us. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I want to say that gone are the days when Kenyans were sold as slave or in the slave market. But when you get somebody leaving the country to go out and look for a job, and you are there, you really you are not exposed to any health care, affordable health care. The treaties that were signed or are signed, or the document that you have, they are valueless when you step in a place or in a country like Saudi Arabia. It becomes useless. And I'm just saying here that I am happy that they have suspended this, and I support the suspension of people, the migrants leaving Kenya.
Senator Shionga.
Yes, Speaker.
Are you insinuating that everybody who travels or they are taken out of this country, they end up becoming miserable from your presentation?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am not saying everyone, but I'm saying most of them, especially in Saudi Arabia, just from the report. And I just want to say that I totally support the travel suspension in Saudi Arabia, and if need be, let it be indefinitely until they come to a conclusion that the treaties, the act, the policies and the framework is put into place to protect our Kenyans and streamline the livelihood of labor migrations that we have here in Kenya. And the ministries should be up in arms to know that Kenyans are suffering. Let them not just sit in those offices and look at Kenyans suffering. We are only informed by social medias. We are called by phone. The way you are seeing our speaker, our chair being called here, I'm also called. We are called every now and then. I happen to support a lady in the airport from Mumias. I have been supporting several. Why am I supporting with my own money when we have Ministry of Health having a budget? Why am I supporting when we have Ministry of Labor having budget? Why is it that they are there to look at Kenyans suffer? I am a Peter woman, I am a Peter senator, I'm a honorable member who witnessed, and I'm saying, let people be up in arms. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Shionga. Senator Olekina.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to support this motion. And first of all, let me congratulate my dear colleague, Senator Sakaja, for having done what most people would be afraid to do, to be able to visit a foreign country and to investigate circumstances that lead to Kenyans having to go through hardship, some ending up in prison because of trying to seek for greener pastures. Mr. Speaker, I've gone through the report, albeit briefly, and I looked at the observations which were made by the Committee of Labor, and I've also looked at the recommendations. And I may have a contrary view to most of my colleagues here because I've lived in the United States of America. I've lived in the US for almost 20 years. In fact, part of my family is still there, and somehow I'm still a resident. Mr. Speaker, the reward of working abroad is actually evident, both to the country that receives labor and the country that exports labor. The biggest question that we must ask ourselves today is, what is it that we need to do in order to ensure that Kenyans who live on their own volition, no one forces a Kenyan to leave this country to go to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to seek for greener pasture. No one forces a Kenyan to leave Kenya to go to Dubai and seek for greener pastures. It is on their own volition. Maybe because of the hardship that they go through in this country. But if we are to understand the reason as to why these Kenyans leave, maybe that is when we can be able to find a better way of resolving this problem. Mr. Speaker, I have a problem with a recommendation that attempt to suggest that as a country we should suspend any migrants from leaving this country to another country to be able to seek for greener pastures. The reason why people end up in prison, even in the United States of America, is because people engage themselves in criminal activities. I can dare say that although I sympathize and I empathize with Kenyans who have ended up in prison in Riyadh, in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, but I must say this: if you are a law-abiding citizen who follows the right immigration laws and you decide to migrate to another country, there's no way you'll end up in jail. There's no way you will end up suffering because you followed the right procedure. Mr. Speaker, I was listening keenly to Senator Cheruyot, and Senator Cheruyot's submission in this House today is a clear attestation or demonstration that there are countries in this world that come up with better systems of promoting their citizens who decide to migrate into other countries. The statistics that Senator Cheruyot was giving are quite, clear. The Philippines, on a yearly basis, exports 1 million Filipinos to go work abroad, skilled laborers and skilled laborers. What the Philippines have done, and which is what I expected my dear good friend Senator Sakaja to be able to do, is to sit with the International Labour Organization and try and examine what the Philippines did, how they came up with the right procedure or the policy that governs their citizens leaving the country to go work abroad. I want to encourage Senator Sakaja to look at the framework which was developed by the Philippines, working with the International Labour Organization, that manages their citizens who leave the country. Mind you, I've just indicated to you that every year there are a million Philippines who leave the Philippines to other countries. Even in this country, we have a lot of Filipinos who come and work here. Are you asking, is it a point of order?
Senator Olekina, do you want to be informed?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
Okay.
Mr. Speaker, I appreciate that the report could be bulky and many members have just gotten it. But what Senator Olekina is asking for, there is actually a case study of the Philippines within the report. That was part of our inquiry. We actually did a thorough work. And there was a presentation given to us on even how they did their BLAs, their bilateral agreements, what they have, and it should be part of the annexures within this report, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, thank you. Olekina, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I appreciate that, and I thank the good Senator of Nairobi for that very useful information. Yes, a case study. I've looked at several case studies on the Philippines. My point was that we need to look at the International Labour Organization framework on management of migrants. The Philippines, because they have actually, in fact, for the last, I can actually say there are over 10 million Philippines who work abroad. If you go to Dubai, you will find Kenyans who work there. Mr. Speaker, the last time I was in Dubai, I met with some Kenyans from Meru, or Nyeri. I met with them on the streets. And I asked them, what are you doing here? They said, we've just come to look for jobs. We are looking for jobs. So it is not true that the Kenyan government export labor. What is the fact, and this is what we need to restrict ourselves in, is that Kenyans leave this country under their own volition to go and look for jobs in the, in other countries. What we need to do now is to balance. Since, globally, exporting labor builds your economy. It builds the Kenyan economy, and it builds also the economy of the country that you go to. We now need to look at what the International Labour Organization have done to be able to manage that, to develop policies, but suspending, or rather stopping Kenyans from going abroad to look for greener pastures when we cannot provide them jobs here. It is literally giving them a knife or a rope to hang themselves. Mr. Speaker, just